Mrs. Maya Christobel, and Maya completed her master's and doctoral work at Harvard Graduate School of Education in Development Psychology and Organizational Development, and has been in the private practice for more than 35 years working with bioneurology. She is a pioneer in the field of biotechnology for healing trauma and is an award-winning writer and filmmaker. She's also an author who has been writing screenplays, ghostwriting novels, and coaching writers for the past 20 years. Maya, it's so good to see you again. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. I'm excited to hear your presentation. You're on mute.
I'm in the right place because I see all kinds of people here. And so give me the technological skinny on. Do I just throw up my PowerPoint presentation and share, or how do you want me to do it, Sheila?
As far as I know, it's already been enabled so that you can just share your screen.
All right, let's see if I can get the technology to work for me. Hold on. Let's do this. And I can't do that until I say share. Hold on.
There you go.
Where am I shared? So is everybody hearing me, and can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, you don't know what a miracle that is. I got to tell you, it's a miracle. Technology is always more mysterious than pretty much everything I just heard from Geraldine. Geraldine blew me away. I hope she can hear me tell her what an extraordinary gift she's given to anyone who's listening today. The effort and work she's done to put that all in one place should be applauded if we could applaud. And I'm thrilled. Sheila has been someone in my life for quite some time, gave me the extraordinary opportunity to write one chapter for her book on walk-ins, which was really, to be perfectly honest, my coming out moment in nearly 71 years. And now she gives me a chance to talk on this incredible platform that Neil has put together on hybrids. And of course, Geraldine gave us this map that is so holographically just deep and wide, and all of us can probably find an aspect of what she's talking about that really can speak to our experience. And that's pretty much what I want to do today. Is I'm talking to you as a hybrid, not about hybrids. And it's a pleasure, and it's a huge topic. And I look at 45 minutes hoping to have lots of questions as quite the challenge. But I'm really happy that everyone is here, and I know a lot of my friends are here, which is really quite supportive and wonderful. I want to talk about being a hybrid as not very extraordinary. And I think a lot of what Geraldine talked about has to do with how prevalent hybridization has been on so many levels, and has really defined the earth and the beings that are here pretty much from the beginning of time. And so, although I'm a storyteller, I'm a psychotherapist, I work on unwiring how we are hardwired for trauma. All of these are how we carry stories in our bodies, in our neurology, in our souls. And so this is my story with a few extra opinions thrown in, and a little bit more on my hybrid experience being here for nearly 70 years. We have a planet that has been struggling from the beginning of time with whatever an individual considers to be the other. We're trying to dissolve that demarcation, the racism, the factionism, and we're at an all-time high on trying to create new consciousness and a closing of a polarity. But our culture is least prepared for the idea of the other as an alien or a walk-in or an extraterrestrial, multidimensional beings or hybrids. One of the things Sheila has done, a great service for all of us, is help us start to define terms we've been using for quite a long time. And she has definitely created new awareness by telling the stories of countless people who have walk-in experiences. But these are anomalous experiences to most of the world around us. It's not like I can be asked to a dinner party and sit down, and when someone says, well, tell us about yourself, I lead with that I'm a hybrid, because that would be the end of my evening with people at dinner. And it's a huge step for us to be able to even have this conversation. But one of the things that I was so excited about this year is that the Senate required the Pentagon to release 70 years of paperwork on contact with alien life, to showing all of the photographs and the documentations that we are visited on a daily basis. And of course, they didn't do very much of that, but it opened an incredible door, because we have not had a mainstream conversation very much about the multidimensional universe that we live in, the visitation that we have been having on this planet since we have started as humans. And it's a door that's open, but it's a door that is people are very skeptical about. So we've been bred to believe in sensational stories. We have news that's fabricated to keep us very adrenalized and arguing about Trump and combating about vaccines. So we're used to sensational stories, and there's really not much more of a sensational story than to talk about unidentified aerial phenomena, extraterrestrial visitations. You'd think it would be the top of the conversation in any news, and it's just not. But we're here to start having it, and we're having it today, which I'm privileged to be part of this dialogue, moving to maybe a more mature level. John Mack said, let me move this. John Mack said that a new breed or tribe, a hybrid form, is being created between alien race or races and human beings. Hybrid men and women with a dual alien human identity appears to be playing a vital role. And John Mack played a vital role in beginning this conversation 30 years ago. And he's been an influential part of my life, which I'll talk about a little later. But I'm talking a lot about the dual identity, the fact that human, alien, composite beings that Geraldine did such a great job of delineating are walking among us all the time. And my story as a hybrid did not include anybody else. It was a very isolating experience. I knew there were hybrids, but I didn't have any contact with them as I was growing up. What I knew, though, from the very beginning is why I was here, that our planet has countless hybrids, that Homo Sapiens Sapiens is just a small fraction of what makes the living beings of Earth. The art that has been talked about by Geraldine and others we'll be talking about today has let us know that we have been visited and we have been populated by beings from all over the universe, and it's just the norm. But my life was not a norm. I was born into a very conservative, normal family, knowing that I was a hybrid, knowing why I was here, and really just becoming one giant experiment to myself, basically. Earth's been a giant laboratory. It's a school since the beginning of time. We're basically a petri dish, every kind of interstellar, interspecies, intergalactic presence of one form or another. And the genus Homo is just a drop in the cosmic bucket. I find myself, I can walk down a street and I can identify species almost in a heartbeat. I can identify where people are from in just as quick a time. And the idea that this is a phenomenon that is new is finally being sort of debunked, and basically Geraldine has made a really good case for that. The phenomenon is global, it's universal. This is a great little picture by a young student in a small school in Zimbabwe. And it was drawn quite some time ago. And we see that people are talking about experiences with the other, which I refer to the other because it's such a vast population of extraordinary energies and spiritual abilities and beings. And so we've been living a life on a planet that has been being visited for a very long time. I believe hybrids define our planet. We're not extraordinary, we're the norm, but we are all individual and unique for why we're here. I think Geraldine brought up the fact that we all come with a purpose or a mission, whether it's from another lifetime, whether this is the first lifetime, that we come for a reason and we're activated to fulfill that purpose at a very specific time. So hybridization is a process, but hybrids are really the norm here. They're born with both ET and human DNA, and Geraldine did an incredible job of explaining all the various ways that there are programs that make this the center of their research. For me, hybrids have very physical differences, but most notably their DNA. But as she was talking about the spectrum, also the sensitivity to the planetary frequency. Hybrids that I know and myself find the frequency of the planet difficult. The 3D body is very difficult to interface with the energies that are going on the planet. And so there's always quite an imperfect fit for me around being just physically occupy my body in a healthy way. I'm going to talk about that in a little while. But my story, as I said, is nothing special. I just had to take the time to finally not only embrace it, but be given the permission to talk about it, which really didn't start until 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I was awakened in the middle of the night, which happens a lot because I happen to have an entourage of teachers and guides and beings that have been with me since I was 2 years old. They are my family. I can hear them. I talk to them. I had used to channel them for a couple of decades, writing thousands of pages of what I've been hearing, what I know. But I was never allowed to really talk about my story until 4 years ago. My abilities make me an outlier in most of my life. I'm a clairaudient. I see things, but I mostly hear. I can hear musical conversation. I hear people's thoughts, but I also hear just conversations whenever I'm open, like sort of a radar, whenever I'm open to the incoming information with my guides. I hear conversation, I hear math. I just hear a lot. So sound is really my way of interfacing with the world. Visuals come second. I can see past, present, and future. That comes as imagery, that comes as ideas. I can hear ideas that are not from a field that, let's say, I'm educated in, let's say physics, and I can usually hear it and understand it. I see future selves in other people. A lot of my work with clients is to help them integrate with their future self. But the main thing is, and this goes with the spectrum people who I have loved working with for decades, Aspergians, anyone on the spectrum to me is our bridge, has been the bridge from one level of consciousness to another. And as a result, I have a high degree of emotional sensitivity, physical sensitivity, heat, cold. I tell people that I feel like my neurology is on the outside of my body, that my nervous system is sort of out front all the time. So as a sensitive, I have to pick right places to eat. I have to pick places to go that have people that have a non-toxic energy, and I'm an empath. And let me just say, because so many people use the word being an empath, so many people are empathic, but being an empath is no fun because you feel at such a deep and profound level for everyone that the process of integrating what you feel from someone else into your own nervous system, how you feel for that person, with that person, and then integrate it and move away from it is a full-time job and has been my entire life. I'm also intolerant of toxicity. I'm living in a city right now by choice, which I haven't done in a long time. I became a grandmother of identical twin baby girls and moved to Denver, which is hugely polluted. There is lots of toxicity in the air, lots of toxic people. I noticed that toxicity is very difficult and has always been really difficult for me to manage as a hybrid. I get ill outside of nature, so I have to leave town as often as possible, go up to nature, be with trees, walk on the ground. It's a spiritual practice that is probably what's made it possible for me to be here this long. And I have high emotional and cognitive intelligence. I feel like this is a definition of me, but it's also a definition of most of the hybrids that I am finally getting to meet in the last 4 years. And here's how it started. People always want to know that sensational story, and I have a sensational one, but I'm going to talk about it briefly because Geraldine covered quite a bit of it, frankly. I was born in a military family, very, very strict. My father was a pilot in the Navy, commander of a very famous aircraft carrier. He was a brilliant MIT engineer. And early on, he was removed from his military job and he was brought into an elite group of people developed by Lockheed's Advanced Development Projects. Lockheed was the first to work with technology from Roswell. So he was part of an organization that had the purpose of incubating innovations from hybrid space technology and genetic manipulation. My dad was part of Skunk Works to start with, and then other secret programs. And as a result of his involvement, I was born from one of those programs. And I can talk about that, which I'm working on finishing writing in a book that I've been working on for probably 20 years, especially talk about my mother and her part in this. But this information didn't come out for me until I was in my 30s. Pieces of it came out, but later on I got the full story when I was in my 30s and 40s. When I was really young, and it started when I was 2, and I can remember being in a crib and I can remember looking outside the window at this long line of large snails that were kind of going across the grass on our yard. And if you know about dew in the morning when it's been a cold night, they leave these really sparkling trails behind them. And I remember being completely connected to these snails. I barely was able to even stand up in my crib. And I remember believing, feeling, understanding my relationship to them. And from that point on, my whole childhood was as if I was looking at having been, which so many people talk about, having been adopted into a family that wasn't mine and living with that fact. But when I was about 5, I started having beings come to me at night, and mostly at night, then at school, then on my walks to school, then when we were at the kitchen table. And of course, at that time, when you're this little and you're seeing that much and feeling as much as I did, the only thing in the 1950s was to assume that your child has some sort of psychiatric problem. So for a very long time, my family tried to fix me, and I was unfixable, but that created that sense of isolation from the very beginning. And without what was at the original moment of my life. Without the dream team there, I'm not certain I would have made it through my teen years. And every decade, that team changed based upon my developmental stage. Depending upon where I was developmentally, I got a whole new team of people who were there to support me, to teach me, to validate my experience since I had no other validation. And then the team changed in my 20s. And from about 20s and 30s on, I became very aware of why I was here. And then by the time I was middle-aged, I referred to them as the observers because my purpose for being was really quite clear. And it also defined why I was such a isolated person. And I'm a Leo, so Leos are highly social. We are highly connected to the world and to people and to animals. And so my identity, being as secretive as it was an incredibly difficult thing. And so in my 30s, I was told, here's why you're here. You're in phase one. Phase one means you are a satellite. We are researching your human experience as a hybrid. You are here to have as many human experiences as possible so that we can learn about the emotional nature of humans, so that we can study humans basically. And so I thought, well, that'll last for about a decade or two. Well, it didn't. It lasted for most of my life as I was the research test balloon in a project that I had a team of observers assisting me in basically. But here's what they said. They said, you can't talk about it. You're on lockdown. You are not allowed to share. Well, it was hard enough to think about who to share with in the first place. And you may not tell anybody what you're learning from us. And you may not, this was the hard part, you may not research. You can't get a book. You can't get on the internet. And at that time, there was no internet. You can't contaminate your human experience by comparing it to or getting a teacher from somewhere else. We just need you to be you. And that was the hardest part of my life here. I got married, I had children. Even though my kids thought I was very strange, they still do. There was no one to talk to. And no one to talk to. And I had made an agreement. It was a sacred agreement, and it was a very difficult thing for me to carry out. So when the internet started, there was so much, everything was happening, and there was dialogue, and there were papers, and there were books, and I knew nothing about it. So I felt like I was sort of on Earth as a desert island in many ways. And I was forced to validate my experience through myself and not ask someone else to validate it or buy a book or try to have someone define my experience for me. And so I did that through writing. I wrote copiously, and that's what took me into a second career as a writing coach and a ghostwriter, because I realized that my whole life was just a story. It was just a story to tell, and I needed to tell it well, and I started to write, which was my way of getting through 4 decades of isolation. And then, and I get always really sad and happy at the same time. I moved to Colorado, and I am so accustomed. I mean, I was talking to somebody yesterday who says, why do my guides always talk to me when I'm in the bathroom? You know, why are people talking to me when I'm in the shower? And I said, well, because water conducts. It's easier to hear. And I was so used to having beings around me in my office with me when I'm working with people. And it's a norm. It's the thing that I call my life. And so I was sleeping and I had to get up to pee. And I noticed that there was a presence in the room, and that was not unusual, but it felt different to me. And so I sat on the bed and I tried to get some clarity because I'm not a great visual. I'm just really great on sound. And I said, I don't recognize you. Who are you? And this lovely voice that felt very familiar said, well, my name is, he didn't say doctor. He just said, my name is John Mack. And I said, well, I don't know who you are. I don't know who you are, which I'm sure was highly insulting. And and at that time, I didn't know that he had died. Sometimes I get a spiritual connection with someone who's just somewhere else, but they're not physically in my space. And he said, but I have the privilege of something. I said, what is it? And he said, I have the privilege of taking you out of lockdown. And he says, you're free. And I really didn't know what he meant. He says, you're free to talk about your experience. You're free to research. And I would suggest you research who I am. So it was at 2 o'clock in the morning. And it was like I had been let out of prison. I ran to the computer and I typed in Dr. John Mack. And this was the picture of John that came up first, a younger version of himself. I knew nothing of his story, and most of you may. And when I saw the picture, I just wept. And familiarity, soul contract, whatever you want to call it. I love the mystery of it all. I hate defining things so radically and strong. I just knew that I knew this person and he has done me an enormous favor. Well, I was up for 48 hours on the internet, and I was finding out that there was just this plethora of people and programs and books and conversations happening. And I was just like a starved person. And, but it was very hard because someone asked me what it was he's on today. It's my favorite person, who's my ex-husband. And he said, well, how come I didn't know? I said, because I could not tell you. And he said, so how are you feeling being out in the world and talking about this? And I said, well, it's been 4 years. And if you know about how you do experiments with people, with rats, and the rat's in a cage, it's a 4x4x4 cage. And that was 3 sides, 4. And you put that rat in that cage for 20, 30, 40 years, then you take the cage and the parameters away. The rat will never leave the parameter that had been there all along. And the first 2 years of my life was just like that. It was like, I felt like I kept bumping up against a glass wall of, how far out can I go? Well, John just changed my life and has been with me ever since for lots of reasons, which we may get a chance to talk about. But I bumped into instantly a young man out of England that many of you may know, and most of you may have read his books, and Miguel Mendoza. And I was told, pick up the phone or send an email to this guy. And I had no idea who Miguel was. And Miguel, who became a very close friend at the time, really held my hand as I sort of came out, which was the phase 2 of my life. Was I couldn't come out for 50 plus years, 60 years. And then I was able to sort of come out and meet people. Well, he had written a book, Disclosure 1 and Disclosure 2. And then with Barbara Lamb, who you're going to get to talk to and meet, I think tomorrow, Barbara and he wrote a book called Meet the Hybrids. And that led me to Mary Rodwell, who you're going to hear later today, who has been a cornerstone of support for how to create, put my feet on the ground as a hybrid and claim who I am and begin to express what I know after being here since the very beginning of what I call the first string of light workers that have come in. I consider myself one of the elderly pioneers on that, and as a hybrid. So Miguel made a huge difference and led me to numbers of people who helped me create community. And Sheila has been one of those for sure. One of the things we talked about at another conference on walk-ins was that we all have a future self. And what I learned along the way was that my dual processor expanded from being a hybrid to including my future self, which was 3 years ago. And it's just like upgrading my software. I think of all of this hybridization as all of our computer programming terms pretty much make a lot of sense to the way I experience moving between sort of processors in me. Over the years, it's become seamless. It's not like I refer to parts of me anymore. I feel seamlessly integrated. Because hybrids are not static biological and spiritual alliances between human and extraterrestrial. We are always evolving, which Geraldine talked a lot about. When we're a match to the vibrational frequency and consciousness of the planet, we evolve, and then the world evolves, and then we evolve, and it is a love contract, and it is we are dependent on each other, both the planet and our own personal evolution. But what shifts is the ability to interface with our past and our future self. And like I said, as a computer or a dual operating system, I can move between worlds. I can move between dimensions. I can move between the head and the heart seamlessly. It was not that way at the beginning. It was very, very difficult to be in a 3D body. This evolution, like Geraldine was saying, always matches the vibrational frequency of where the planet is. And I don't just mean the people of the planet, I mean the planet itself. That's a whole other conversation I love to have, which is basically how we are an extension of Earth herself, and her nervous system, her wounds, her trauma. So in many ways, people always say, well, what makes you different? You look like you're so normal. And my kids would say different. They'd say my mother is very abnormal. What makes me me? Me means purpose. I have a purpose. Every hybrid has a purpose. And these are mine. One is that physically, if I'm in the proximity of people, it used to be when I'm in the proximity of a person, or I touch them, or I hug them, I have the ability through heart entrainment to activate DNA. Now it can happen remotely, which 10 years ago, I don't think that was really possible just because of where we were. But DNA activation and heart entrainment is my mission. It's why I'm here. I am organized around justice and truth. When it isn't happening, I'm grumpy. I'm not happy, and I have a lot more to say than people want to hear. I think that is also very much a part of the new children who are coming in, which are my granddaughters for sure. And the crystal children, the indigo children, any kind of hypocrisy, injustice, if anybody hurts an animal or is a liar, they have a radar for it. It's intolerable. And although these generations of evolving young people have great compassion, they also have incredible wisdom and will call a spade a spade. As an activator, and I consider, if someone says, are you a hybrid? I say I'm an activator. As an activator, and if we think about what that really truly means, if my vibrational frequency lives at a level of love and grace and joy, then you can plant me in a garden of people, and it will change the vibrational frequency of that group of people or that person that I'm working with. So in many ways, who was Abraham Hicks, has talked about this whole phenomenon of matching vibrational energies, and when we're not a match and we're in contrast versus when we're a match. That is probably my greatest challenge living as a human here is all the times that things are not a match. All the contrast that is just contrast. It takes a spiritual process to navigate and to participate in at a level of love and a level of truth. And basically, what makes me me is I'm devoted to unity and love, to lack of separation, to to there being no other than all of us, all beings, off planet, on planet, animals, insects. I am devoted to that. My work is about that, and that defines me. And the ongoing opportunity, and I put this in last today because it came up in the middle of the night. There's an opportunity here, and I think it's tolerance. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Being a hybrid is being an outlier in a world where conformity and approval is just so very difficult. But I'm a phenomenologist. Experience is my teacher. Experience is why I came. And as a phenomenologist, when it comes to defining reality, I feel reality is a very vast thing. I don't feel definitions serve us a lot of time. So what is the wider cosmological context of the phenomena of earth seeds or ETs or hybrids or walk-ins, wanderers, dimensional beings? There's so many titles. There is no correct or uniform answer. There is only the experience of the person who calls themselves a starseed, an ET, a hybrid, or a walk-in. And these dialogues that are happening here, and thanks to Sheila, and thanks to Neil, these dialogues are giving us a chance to find the tolerance of the definition. We do not have to nail it down to some box because we're trying to get out of all the boxes. We just need to listen to the stories that need to be told, the stories that are consistent. They have uniformity. Most science does not like the subjective. I'm all over the subjective. It's meaningful to me, the subjective. We need the science more than ever before, but we need the power of our stories as well, because there's only one person that can talk about being a hybrid, and that's a hybrid. There's only one person that can talk about being a walk-in, and that is a walk-in. And we need these conversations, hopefully at dinner tables at some point. They're not the dinner tables I go to, but here's something I bumped into yesterday, and it is my moment in this conversation that's so deep. 25 years ago, Carl Sagan said this about America and his fear. He said, "I have a foreboding of an America in my children's and grandchildren's time when the United States is a service and information economy and when nearly all the key manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries. When awesome technological powers are in the hands of a very few and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues. When the people have lost the ability to set their own agendas, which I call having their own inner compass, or knowledgeably question those in authority. When clutching our crystals and nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what is true, we slide almost without noticing back into superstition and darkness." And he has defined exactly where we are. The door opened with the Pentagon Papers. It went silent within days. The dialogues on mainstream are a trickle, as they were not such a trickle before. 60 Minutes with Avi Loeb and MSNBC. All of a sudden, we're slipping, and we are all trying to get a foothold for a conversation that we have a world that really has their hands over their ears and their hands over their eyes about. So this particular conference is the beginning of that conversation. It needs to deepen, it needs to get more scientific, it needs to become more political, it needs to be grounded in maturity, and we have an opportunity to do that. We're starting that here in this conference and so many of the other ones here at Portal. So I'm focused on the story. I'd like to be focused on the science as well, but the story is where I live. I live in my own, and I help people tell their own stories as well. But this is the part of my hybrid story. I had secrecy as 60 years of my life. And so it's coming out now. I'm coming into a world where the secrets need to be shared, and I can only share them from my point of view. But there are millions of people who have had secret stories, secret lives, secret experiences that need to tell those stories. We need to end the cult of secrecy, which has been our government's contribution. All the governments of our planet have contributed to that secrecy, and become much more transparent, much more vibrantly certain of what we know and what we have been through. It's extraordinarily important and imperative. I tried to make this shorter because I'm so interested in your questions, frankly. If you want to know more about me, here's how you find me. My website is www.interdimensions.com. My email, and please email me, is mayachristobel@gmail.com. I will get back to you either way you reach out. I do various kinds of therapeutic storytelling, therapeutic helping of people with the stories that you have and the questions you have. And you'll see that on my website. But I'm mostly interested, if I stop sharing this, how do I do that? I'm really interested in questions. I did not want to blab on so long that I couldn't. Did I get rid of it yet? Can I do that? Quit. Quit. Hang on, let's quit. So Sheila or anybody else, Neil, I want to answer questions because I've still got some time.
Yeah, let's do it. Sheila Allen, you there?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Let's see if there's any questions here. Yeah, there are a few questions. If you could open up the Q&A area, Sheila, and read them off.
Sure. So Janice is curious to know if you could talk more about your mother's experience in the program that your father was involved in. Was she aware of her role in the hybridization program, and how did she feel about that?
So first of all, I want you to know that I knew mostly everything about this close to their death. My mother would not talk about it much, so a lot of it came from finding papers, talking to my dad before he died and after he died. My mother was not, she was not an approachable person. And what I know at this point, which is piecing things together, because my dad's life was so predicated on like never speaking about anything. I mean, I just, my guides just helped me stumble on a bunch of paperwork, is that she was not aware. And then right after I was born, she had both her ovaries removed right after I was born. And she went into quite a state of, I'm going to call it inaccessibility. So I never once had the opportunity to have a conversation with her. I believe that she was selectively used without any memory. I don't think she was not, I don't think a willing participant. So that's a very interesting question, Janice. And that brings me to say one thing is that I'm not I'm not a terribly interested person in details. The details of disclosure at large are not usually where I spend a lot of my intellectual time. I have never had to go digging into my life to figure out how it all worked, because I just knew how it all worked. I didn't have to figure out who I was. I knew who I was. And I was so on board with this incredible adventure that the duplicity and the secrecy and the slightly diabolical nature of my father's involvement in these programs, which extended way, way into other things, I didn't have a need to dig around in the draconian aspect of it and figure out who's at fault for something, because I was really just glad to be here. I've never not been glad to be here. So how they went about it never became much of a path of inquiry for me, as well as everyone wants to talk about where they're from. Oh, what planet are you from? Or what race are you from? And I know that I'm from the star system in Vega, and I know I have angelic backgrounds, and I don't care to really know a whole lot more. Don't know why that is, because most of us really want to know those things. I just get my general info and I sort of move on and do my mission. But that's what I know about my mother, Janice.
Maya, when you were younger and you began having visitations, can you kind of share a little bit more about what that was like for you as a young child?
So I think this is a very classic program, basically, is that my visitations were always consistent with my age. So when I was little, it was animals. When I was a little older, it was sort of orbs, fairy spirits, still animals, always animals. As every developmental leap, I would have more adult supervision, if you want to call it that. Sort of like there would be more personages. So all the way through the years of magical thinking, which is up until about the age of 7, my visitations were magical thinking and lots of magical beings and lots of energy beings, multidimensional beings that do just energy fields and color. Then they became personages that were recognizable to me as a growing teen, which ended up being the consciousness of Jesus. I could place Jesus in the rubric of our cultural life. There was no anomaly there. It was like, oh, I understand Jesus. And then by the time I was in my mid-20s to late 20s, then a whole team started coming in that were they were from 4 different races on a research vessel, and their job was to catalog everything I gave them as a satellite, as a radio. I was like a radio transmitter, basically. And then each decade I'd get sort of, if the next decade needed to be more science, I got a lot of science people. If the next decade had to be something that had to do with physics, I got more of those people. And then it just sort of stayed. Since I was about 50, the same group were individuals that I would talk to every day and ask about their life on other planets. But when John Mack came in, that was a very different experience. That was a human energy field that I had not had before. I'd had my grandmother. I mean, I'd had, the way we are visited by spirits who care about us, right? Guides who care about us, but not part of the project of who I am. So when John came in, it was such a demarcation. It was such a demarcation from anything that I've gone through before. And I think it needed to be, because I was moving out of 60 plus years of silence, and so that's kind of how that worked.
So a question comes from Tammy, and I hope I can state this properly. For people who are just discovering themselves, discovering that they may be hybrid, and they continue to go to like therapies, once they're able to discover what's really going on with them, are there ways that they can continue to connect with other hybrids, I'm assuming, to share their story? I know we have the Wish Alliance, and we invite anyone to join because we have, the weekly meetings, and those are free of charge. Anybody can come and attend. But she's stating that her path is very lonely and it's not been easy, and it's extremely crazy for anyone that's not awake. And she says, you say to get this out, but she's wondering how she can get it out.
Well, that's a fabulous question. And what was her first name?
Tammy?
Tammy. You know, Tammy, that is the only question, is like, when I read that quote, that's 25 years old, it was one of the last recorded quotes from Carl Sagan before he died. And he said, this is what I see, this is what terrifies me. And he was basically saying, here's going to become a society that is not in self-inquiring and recognizing the inner compass of who we are as the most powerful nuclear bomb on the planet is inside ourselves. And so a lot of it is, once you recognize who you are in this ocean of possibility, the most important part is to validate that who you are is exactly who you are. And you may not know how to practice being who you are yet, but to me, the story of who each person is, how they got to be where they are, is medicine. It's like, it's better than the vaccine for sure. It's like getting an inoculation of confidence, of certainty, of inner authority, because when we recognize that we are blessed in a hard way, it's a hard bargain to be a hybrid on this planet, or a walk-in, any of the anomalous things that we can say. Once we say, I'm claiming this person, putting it on paper is like birthing ourselves. It's like, we're entrusted with that story. I have to tell my story. It's a sacred obligation, but it's also a homeopathic remedy. It's like the minute I tell the story, I am changing my very presence inside myself in this world, and I will magnetize to myself people just like me. I'll meet them at the grocery store. I don't have to go looking for groups, even though that's a great idea, because there's so many. When in the 50s and 60s, there was nobody. There was nobody talking. You couldn't find anybody. And we used to call them kindred spirits. I'd be at some theater somewhere watching a movie, and if Millie, you're on here, it's all about you. I'd be at some theater and I have an experience with somebody in the theater, then we go meet in the bathroom, and she'd say, I think I know you. And I think, well, I think I know you too. And it's like, should we know each other? And then we'd go have tea. It had to be this sort of grassroots thing. Well, now we have this huge menu of options out there, which is a little confusing sometimes. But the main thing is to anchor the story to such a degree that it's like a beacon that goes out. And that beacon, somebody at Walmart will see it if you ever go to Walmart. That beacon going out, somebody will see you somewhere and say, I've been waiting for you, and I don't know you. But I feel like the crucible, or the pathway to what you're asking about, Tammy, is first to identify your own authority and tell your story. You don't have to be a Pulitzer Prize writer. You just tell it. And then you maybe share it on a blog, or share it somewhere that wants writing, or you just share it with one person. That we have to get our multidimensional compass in order before we can create community, before we know what our contribution truly is. But I agree with you, Tammy. It is a lonely, lonely, lonely road. It is not easy, but you're birthing yourself at a time where there's the dialogue. I came in a time that nobody even knew what the word hybrid meant, So bravo to you. And I think there's lots of options, but your story is where you start.
Beautiful. Thank you, Maya. And we have I think we have time for one final question. This comes from Linda. And she said, do hybrids generally know that they are hybrids?
Well, I'm going to borrow from Geraldine a little bit. It depends on your program. It depends on your program as to whether you remember or you don't. I do find that by virtue of my age, it's a little unusual that I came in with full memory. I don't meet other hybrids that are my age that remember everything and their gifts started instantly. But again, it took me time to to quantify and define who I was. I just knew I was from somewhere else and that my little operating system was way different. I didn't have the whole blueprint of my life in front of me, or I might have asked to go back, you know, say, let this cup pass from me, please. But the answer is it's less frequent than you'd think. And it does depend upon the program of hybridization that has been responsible for why you're here.
Thank you, Maya.
You're welcome. Thank you, Sheila. You're
Thank
just a
you.
spark plug of opportunity for all of us.
Oh, well, thanks so much for coming. It was a beautiful presentation. And Maya, can you tell one more time how people can connect with you?
I can be found at mayachristobel@gmail.com. I'll put it in the chat. And my website, I have many, but the one that's interesting to you guys is enterdimensions.com, E-N-T-E-R, dimensions.com. That also lets you get a hold of me. And once we're done, I'll stick it in the chat for anybody that's interested.